Good afternoon and welcome to the third webinar on language education and multilingualism in Europe. Focus today is on innovative practices of bilingual education and lessons learned and policy pointers for future practices, and more particularly adaptation of the bilingual models to the fast-changing plurilingual ecosystem. The series of 4 webinars are organized by the European Commission, DG Education and Culture, and are hosted by NESET, the network of experts working on the social dimension of education and training. And the network is skillfully managed by PPMI, the Public Policy and Management Institute in Vilnius, Lithuania. My name is Dragana Avramov, and I'm the scientific coordinator of the network, comprising some 60 permanent members. We rely on the capacity of our network to scoop most relevant research evidence and to bring on board the most prominent experts in the topical areas that are of particular interest to the European Union. So it is really an opportunity to transpose research finding into strong policy guiding messages. Up to date, we have had 3 webinars, and we addressed the use of ICT to promote plurilingual learning. The case study was elaborated before the pandemic and became even more interpelling under the lockdown conditions. We also looked at a specific method, accelerated integrated model used in the Netherlands and in Canada, that showed us how learning languages can be effective and fun for the learners. We also discussed the network of cross-border schools that valorize language learning by pupils and are using language labels to certify that high-quality learning is built into their schools. All the webinars, the past ones and today's, are being recorded and are available on NESET's YouTube channel, so people can either go back to them or those who missed the live stream can pick up on the key messages. We will have a sum-up webinar to answer questions put forward by the participants that we could not address in each webinar, and to draw the key lessons. That 4th webinar is on 8th of July. The rationale for today's webinar is to look at cases of regions that have a long tradition in bilingual education, which was originally tailored to preserve the most widely spoken minority or non-dominant language, and that pursue also a model of regional and curriculum level implementation. We will also look at the case of Finland with its broader national curriculum level language awareness focus. And to address these case studies, we have as speakers Marisa Cavalli, who has an impressive track record of hands-on experience, as she was a French language teacher for 17 years. Then she became active in teacher training and research for informing policymakers, has carried out significant work for the Council of Europe, the language policy unit for many years, and she's now consultant to the European Center for Modern Languages of the Council of Europe in Graz. Jon Andoni Duñabeitia is a researcher in the cognitive science of language at University of Nebrija, and is also professor at the Department of Languages and Culture of the Arctic University of Norway. He's expert in neurobiological and cognitive substances of multilingualism. And a third speaker is Jenni Alisaari, who worked at the Department of Teacher Education at the University of Turku. And since 2013, she teaches pre-service and in-service teachers on linguistically and culturally responsive teaching. She's also very engaged in advocacy of multilingualism, language learning, and especially learning by singing. Among the speakers, we have agreed on a mini language convention. Today, nobody will be speaking their mother tongue, and we will each speak the language we feel most comfortable with. For Marisa, that is French, but she has accommodated those who are more familiar with English and has prepared slides in English, while the other two presenters and the moderator will be expressing themselves in English, each with an accent that may reveal our multiple identities. The attendees are invited, preferably to write in English, and to use the chat function, ask questions and post comments, some of which we will try to answer in real time via the chat box. Some we will cluster and forward to the authors following their presentation. Some will be picked up on the 8th of July together with the key lessons learned. But some, and I would like to underline this, will be an inspiration for us to brainstorm on new topical areas and how to scoop most relevant research findings worldwide that merit particular policy attention. So please use the chat box also to make specific suggestions for the future and to inform us on what you are working at the moment. I will give the floor now to Marisa to tell us in 10 minutes how the practice to preserve the most widely spoken minority language in Valle d'Aosta region in Italy evolved and how it can be an inspiration to other regions. Marisa.
Thank you very much, Dragana. Bonjour à tout le monde. Je remercie le réseau NESET de m'avoir invité à cette présentation et je suis très heureuse de vous montrer les évolutions du modèle d'éducation biplurilingue adopté dans ma région. Donc, quelques éléments contextuels pour que vous compreniez quels sont les enjeux d'un côté politique et de l'autre didactique de l'éducation biplurilingue au Val d'Aoste. La région Valle d'Aoste est la plus petite région italienne. Elle est coincée, comme vous le voyez, entre France, Suisse et Italie. Linguistiquement, elle appartient au domaine de la francophonie. Elle appartient au domaine notamment du franco-provençal, vous le voyez, c'est une pointe extrême, c'est l'extrême pointe de la francophonie périphérique et historiquement, il a une histoire intéressante puisqu'il a appartenu depuis le XIe siècle au duché de Savoie. Sachez que le duc de Savoie...
Marisa, I have to interrupt you. We are getting messages that the sound is not loud enough. Could you please increase the volume?
Yes, I made this. It's better? It's better?
I think a little bit more because quite a few participants are reacting.
The sound is good now? The sound is good enough? Do you hear me?
A little bit low still.
Low? It's too low? No. I don't know. Vous m'entendez?
If you get closer to the microphone.
No, my microphone. Oh no. No. No, it's good. No, it's good.
Yeah, a suggestion would be also for participants to increase a little bit their sound, because I did that and I can hear Marisa perfectly.
Do you hear me now? No?
Yes. Yes, it is better. And I would just like to reiterate before you continue, Marisa, that there is no simultaneous translation, but Marisa is following the PowerPoints, which you can see on your screens. Marisa, please do continue.
J'étais en train de dire que le Val d'Aoste a fait partie du duché de Savoie et que le duc de Savoie deviendra le roi d'Italie. Mais plus important encore, à la cour de Savoie, où tout le franco-provençal, on parlait également très précocement le français qui s'est diffusé par la suite chez la bourgeoisie, chez la petite aristocratie valdôtaine. Le français est devenu dans le duché de Savoie langue officielle à partir de 1561. En 1861, le Val d'Aoste bascule de la francophonie à l'italophonie. Il devient partie de l'État italien. Ce n'est qu'en 1948, par un statut spécial d'autonomie accordé par l'État italien, que le Val d'Aoste est reconnu en tant que minorité linguistique bilingue et que dont elle a les moyens pour sa politique linguistique. Voilà. Alors, maintenant, la réforme bilingue suit deux voies séparées. La première, c'est l'enseignement du français en tant que langue qui se réalise à partir de 1948. Tandis que ce que nous appelons les réformes bilingues, c'est-à-dire l'utilisation du français dans les disciplines, a pris place dans le temps, progressivement, à chaque niveau différent et de façon dans des climats pédagogiques et didactiques différents. Je vais vous présenter surtout les réflexions qui concernent l'école moyenne, le niveau cité 2, parce que c'est là que les enjeux disciplinaires de l'enseignement bilingue se font plus forts et exigeants. Il faut se rendre compte que cette réforme bilingue successive n'avait pas au début réellement un but didactique, méthodologique, pédagogique. C'était une mesure de politique linguistique dont la finalité était la sauvegarde du français, qui était une langue co-officielle au Val d'Aoste avec l'italien. Donc, le français dans le répertoire des locuteurs valdôtains est assuré par l'école à travers une éducation bilingue précoce et généralisée pour tout le monde, à l'intérieur d'un cadre sociolinguistique qui contemple un multilinguisme sociétal assez diffus et des répertoires plurilingues assez répandus. Comme c'est un projet de politique linguistique, le décideur a pris une décision que je trouve personnellement très forte et en même temps très fine. Et à l'époque, elle était assez originale. Le souci du décideur était de ne pas créer des fractures, des divisions, en laissant choisir une langue ou l'autre, fractures qui auraient pu se produire à l'intérieur de la société, dans les familles, entre les élèves et aussi entre les enseignants. Ce choix donc politique remarquez, à une période où c'était l'immersion, le modèle absolu et scientifiquement le plus reconnu mondialement, nous a amené à refuser certains principes binaires monolingues de l'éducation plurilingue. Par exemple, la constitution d'écoles séparées selon les langues. Ça se fait dans certaines régions italiennes, ou l'enseignement de certaines matières dans une langue et l'autre dans l'autre. De la sorte, on a complètement abandonné des principes comme une personne, une langue, ou alors une discipline, une langue. On a décidé que l'utilisation des deux langues, l'italien et le français, devait être réalisée par tous les enseignants dans toutes les matières, dans toutes les activités didactiques pour tous les enfants qui entrent dans le système éducatif valdotin. Vous voyez, là, c'est une toute première caractéristique de l'éducation bilingue valdostane. C'est un choix qui est démocratique, qui n'est pas élitiste, mais que certains, un petit pourcentage de la population, peut lire comme une sorte d'imposition. Cela nous a amené à l'alternance des langues. Mais heureusement, à l'époque, malgré le modèle de l'immersion canadienne, nous étions en train de voir naître des travaux au niveau de la Suisse voisine, des conceptions nouvelles du bilinguisme et de la personne bilingue. Une personne bilingue qui utilise quotidiennement ces deux langues et les alterne, ne l'utilise pas de façon toujours séparée. Il est à même de le faire, mais il ne le fait pas toujours. Comment construire une didactique sur le principe de l'alternance? Eh bien, on a pensé que les deux langues, en s'alternant, pouvaient entrer dans le jeu de la conceptualisation, de la reformulation conceptuelle. Couplé également à la diversification des genres discursifs, des genres textuels dans les deux langues. Et surtout, nous voyons dans la plus grande opacité, la moindre transparence de la langue 2, un moyen pour faire en sorte que l'élève inspecte plus soigneusement, de façon beaucoup plus approfondie, la langue, il arrive à saisir les aspects conceptuels des consignes, des textes, etc. Naturellement, c'est un modèle qui n'est pas uniquement bilingue, puisque nous avons commencé à enseigner une langue étrangère très rapidement et précocement. On a travaillé sur la didactique intégrée des langues, donc des démarches interdisciplinaires entre les trois langues enseignées. À partir de 2012, nous avons eu des classes optionnelles et expérimentales de franco-provençal, dont le parler local. Et naturellement, actuellement, on est en train de s'ouvrir au répertoire linguistique et culturel des enfants migrants à travers des activités d'éveil aux langues. Alors, quelles sont les conditions pour qu'un modèle comme celui-ci soit intéressant et puisse être réalisé? Naturellement, il faut que les enseignants connaissent les deux langues. Il faut surtout faire un bon travail avant le travail des pratiques ou parallèlement un gros travail sur les représentations à travers une formation initiale qui manque encore sur ces aspects bilingues au Val d'Ost et la formation continue sur justement la conception du bilinguisme et de la personne bilingue, sur les spécificités de cette personne bilingue et la voix, son fonctionnement. Il n'est pas la somme de deux monolingues. Il faut avoir des exigences réalistes dans l'enseignement. L'importance aussi des dimensions langagères de toutes les langues dans l'apprentissage des disciplines, que ce soit en langue 1 italien, en langue 2 le français, ou que ce soit en langue 3 dans les méthodologies CLIL. Surtout qu'on essaie de voir dans la reformulation dans deux langues une façon de rendre plus solide, de mieux ancrer les connaissances pour tous les élèves. Autre élément de succès absolu, c'est que la recherche-action a été pour nous le moteur conceptuelle de notre recherche, une recherche-action qui voyait le travail collectif d'enseignants de langue, d'enseignants des autres disciplines, d'universitaires, linguistes et méthodologues des autres disciplines. C'est cette recherche-action qui nous a permis, à travers l'expérimentation dans le terrain, de construire une didactique biplurilingue tout à fait adaptée à notre situation et s'appuyant sur l'expertise des différents acteurs. Bon, alors, qu'est-ce que peut apporter une expérience comme la nôtre à d'autres situations scolaires? Eh bien, sans doute une forte attention aux différentes langues présentes, que ce soit la langue 1, la langue 2, la langue 3 ou d'autres langues encore, et dans leur statut spécifique, et cela pour chacun des apprenants. Et une conscience de l'importance des langues dans la construction des connaissances disciplinaires. Cela nous amène donc à une analyse très approfondie de la dimension langagière de chacune des disciplines qui doit être conduite de façon interdisciplinaire. Le Conseil de l'Europe et le CLV sont en train de travailler sur ces matières-là, mais seulement, disons, en une langue pour l'instant, la langue ou les langues de scolarisation, nous y avons travaillé de façon bilingue. Ces dimensions langagières ont intérêt à être explicitement enseignées, que ce soit en langue 1, que ce soit en langue 2, et mieux de façon interdisciplinaire. Ensuite, naturellement, une utilisation des 2-3 langues à travers une alternance qui soit bien conçue et bien pensée et surtout bien planifiée. Naturellement, dans le cas des dialectophones et des allophones, les étudiants issus de la migration, il faut prendre en considération, prendre en compte et utiliser le répertoire linguistique culturel, non pas uniquement dans les activités d'éveil aux langues, mais dans la construction même des connaissances. Tout cela finalisé à quoi? Non pas comme dans certains modèles anciens, pour une meilleure connaissance linguistique. Celui-ci est un modèle qui allie le linguistique au cognitif, mais une meilleure appropriation du contenu disciplinaire en incluant également les contenus culturels, les dimensions culturelles. Mais surtout, tout cela a comme but ultime le succès scolaire de tous les étudiants. Parce que notre expérience nous dit que tous les élèves, les plus faibles, profitent largement de l'utilisation des 2 langues dans la construction des connaissances. Vous voici un peu de bibliographie. Je vous remercie infiniment de m'avoir écouté malgré ces problèmes d'audition et merci encore.
Thank you very much, Marisa. Your presentation has caused an avalanche of comments in the chat, very positive, multilingual, because we have also seen quite a lot of text written in Spanish, a mixture of English, Spanish, French. So I think this combination worked very well. Also as a clear message about what we mean by plurilingualism in Europe. And I think that some of the questions that we have seen by the attendees will be addressed actually in the presentation by Jon, because the case of the Basque autonomous region is quite specific, and I suggest that we go straight to your presentation and we'll see whether we have some time to capture similarities and differences. Thank you, Jon.
Hi, good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. Is it a yes? Great.
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm going to talk about the curious case of the Basque Country, because the Basque Country, as you may already know, is officially is made of 3 provinces that are in the north of Spain, very near to the French border. And we have two languages being spoken there. The first one is the official language of the Spanish state, which is Spanish, of course. And then we also have Basque, which is co-official in the Basque territory and in some other places too. But this is not an official language in other places of Spain. So we have a big language, which is the majority language, Spanish, and then a minority language, which is Basque. For those of you interested in knowing the origin, Spanish is, as you may know, a Romance language. And then the funny thing with Basque is that it's linguistically, it's a pre-Indo-European language, which in other words means we don't know where it comes from. So it's a very ancient language whose origin is not solved yet. Nowadays, if you take a look at the statistics in the Basque Country, we can find more than 50% of active and passive bilinguals, meaning people who speak relatively well the two languages, Spanish and Basque. And then we have around 45% of people who mainly or only speak Spanish, even though they may have some knowledge of Basque, but they are not even considered passive bilinguals. So in terms of monolingual, bilingual situation, we are more bilingual than monolingual at the societal level. How have we reached to this good point in which two languages could be used at the societal level? Where, well, after the dictatorship that we had until 79, we couldn't speak more languages or any other language than Spanish. Then from that moment on, we started introducing the co-official languages as co-official, as having an official entity in each of the corresponding plurilingual territories of Spain. And in the case of the Basque Country, in the early 80s, we included Basque in the school system with different models that we call. We have three main models, which is the A model, in which you get into a strand which is mainly taught in Spanish, where you also have some English classes, of course, but also you get some Basque lessons, not too many to be fair. Then you have exactly the opposite, which is the D model, because it's the third model, but it's not C as it would be in the ABC model. It's simply because in Basque we don't have C, so it goes directly to D. And in this D model, everything or mainly everything is taught in Basque, but we also have some Spanish lessons, of course, and the corresponding English lessons. But let's say most of the time, Basque is the core language, and it's the vehicular language at school. And then we have the bilingual language, model, which is the B model, in which on paper, 50% of the time you would be able to speak in Basque, and 50% of the time you would be able to speak in Spanish. And English is also included in different modes. Nowadays, more clear than any other thing, but not too many hours per week, to be fair. So I'll briefly guide you through the process we have gone through from the early 80s. At the very beginning, as I said, it was everything in Spanish in the educational system, and this was very exclusive for other languages. And in the case of the Basque Country, it was clearly exclusive for Basque, because Basque could not be taught. It was not a useful language at school, and it was banned. Then luckily we got fast to a moment in which, thanks to the linguistic policies of the Basque government, we had Basque as a vehicular language at the school too. But this led us to a point in which we had some sort of linguistic segregation, because either you got to the A model, everything in Spanish, or to the D model, everything in Basque. And then we also had this B model, but to be fair, time has said that this B model has not worked that well, because we only have around 20% of the pupils in this B model. Actually, it's very difficult to manage, and it's good to know how other people are doing, because in a bilingual society, a priori, one would think that the bilingual model should be the best one, or the most needed one, and it's not the case in the Basque Country. So this is what we call the integration model, in which you try to put the two languages within the same system, but this led us to a sequence of monolingual classes. So you go first to a Basque lesson, then you go to a Spanish lesson, then again to a Basque one, and you go following a sequence of monolingualisms, not really a multilingual or plurilingual school, except for the fact that at the end of the day, you've been able to speak in the two languages, but not within the same class. So we are promoting a new model, which is much more inclusive than that, in which not only these two languages, but also other languages, like the third language, English, and probably other languages that our pupils bring from home into the same school context. It's clearly not easy, but this should be the way to go, because if not, we are again promoting some sort of linguistic segregation that may end up in a social segregation and led to again, exclusion. In terms of numbers, the numbers are very clear at the moment. The blue line that you can see on the screen corresponds to the bilingual model, the B model, and as you see, it has been around the 15–20% for more than 25 years now, and it's not the superstar of the linguistic systems, to be fair. We started from a model in which mainly everything was in Spanish, the A model, and in the 90s, as you see, more than 60% of the students were enrolled in this type of model, but it dropped down to something like 17–16% nowadays, because students or families have consistently preferred to enroll their sons, daughters, in a Basque-speaking model, so in the D model, in which Basque is the vehicular language, and then you also have some bits here and there of Spanish and English and probably other languages too. So that's at the moment the star. And if you need to put your son or daughter in the Basque system at the school, you most probably would put him or her in this model. This is what the stats say at the moment. Of course, you can go to the public system, or you can go to the private system, as in other places. But we have one system which is called the Ikastola system. It's not a public one; it's a private one with some public funds, made at the moment of more than 100 schools all over the Basque Country, with nearly 60,000 students. So they really serve many families and many students, and around 4,500 teachers. So it's a very big system. The Ikastola system was originated to promote and boost the use of Basque as a language, but also to promote the Basque culture. It's not only in order to promote the language, but all the cultural system that surrounds the language. And I'm going to just focus on two paradigmatic examples. One of them is Laura Ikastola, which is set in one of the provinces of the Basque Country, the one in red there, Vizcaya. Bilbao is the capital city there. It's not in the capital city, it's in a territory which is like very green, nearby the mountains, and the typical student or pupil that goes there is not the city student. Probably most of the families in this Ikastola are native Basque speakers, and if they are not native Basque speakers, they use Basque at home. So whenever the little ones enter in kindergarten, they are already native Basque speakers. And that's one of the types of Ikastola you can find, in which most of the customers, so to say, most of the users are native Basque speakers. They also know some Spanish, of course, given the situation, the co-officiality situation. And then you have a different institution like Olavide Ikastola, which being from the same system, being an Ikastola too, it's set in Álava, which is the sort of yellowish, orangish province you can see down there, and it is in the city. It is very nearby the city center. So Araba, in contrast to Vizcaya, is much more Spanish speaking. And there's a 10% difference in the bilingualism level between these two provinces. So as you may imagine, the typical pupil that would go to this Olavide Ikastola may come from a home in which Spanish is the mother tongue and the vehicular language, and then they get into the system in which Basque is purportedly the vehicular language. So it's relatively shocking. So how would you deal with these two realities? Well, by flexibilizing the system, even if we are talking about the system which is to promote a language and to promote the culture, each ikastola or each school should have the chance to analyze the surroundings, the context in which it is set, and the type of families that will send the sons and daughters to the school. Because the linguistic reaction to that can be different and should be different. And this is actually what they do in these two paradigmatic examples. In one of them, they simply incorporate the same language that is being spoken at home. And in the other one, they need to do some sort of transition from the native Spanish-speaking families to the Basque-speaking situation that they want to promote in the Ikastola. And this takes time and effort. The numbers are pretty good, as I said. Nowadays, we are talking about more than 40% of people with a very good level of Basque in the Basque Country. But the two lines that you can see that are almost flat, they are not flat, they are increasing, it's the use of the language. And this is the problem that we are facing in the Basque Country. We know the language, but we are not that big fans of using the language at home or with the friends. And that's a shocking situation because we send our kids to places in which they taught them, they teach them in Basque, but then we don't, or they don't use Basque at home and with the friends. And this is probably due to the fact that we have institutionalized Basque as a language. So we teach Basque in a place called school. And outside this school is not that useful. So society has not responded correctly to the use of the language. So this is what we need to fight for at the moment. And we need to fight for new models in which the two languages or more than two languages could coexist within the same place. We advocate for language mixing and language alternation as a possible solution from the very beginning of the process. We need to flexibilize the programs, of course, and it is very important to have a correct teacher training programs in CLIL and other methodologies. It's not about teaching the language, it's about teaching in a language. And as Jenni will tell us later, obviously we have the need for national policies at this plurilingual level. This can be done with flexible systems, but it is clearly needed that some policies are due. And translanguaging is one of the options we advocate for, in which all the languages known to the person can be used within the same place, call it class, call it school, call it home. And this is a very easy way to integrate languages that are not that well known, like the third language. And in the case of bilingual societies, even the other language that is the second language that sometimes is not too well known by students. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jon. I think that you have answered some of the questions that were posted in the chat, more particularly with respect to language spoken at home and language spoken at school. But I think that something that was very important that permitted both presentations, it's the issue of segregation and how to overcome segregation based on different languages. If Jenni doesn't mind, I would actually like now to launch a little Mentimeter so that we get a good overview of who is out there in the virtual world. We could see some countries mentioned in the chat. So Cosmin is going to guide us through this Mentimeter and ask you a few questions. So Cosmin, will you take over?
Yes, Dragana, thank you. I was just, hello everyone. I was experiencing some problems, but here it is. So I would like to mention first, I see that people are already voting. So while you are voting, I will say a few words regarding this webinar. So first, the instructions, you need to go to menti.com and to insert the code 503040 And the first question is about your participation in the previous webinar of this series of 4 webinars. What I wanted to mention is that in the past we used to organize under NESET an annual conference, traditional face-to-face conference. Now we are switching to these webinars, and we are very happy with the number of participants that the webinars are attracting. Today we are around 200 people watching on Zoom, and perhaps a few others on YouTube. So it's a sign that this kind of format is highly appreciated, and we can spread the message regarding the importance of multilingual education in this particular case, but other educational topics in upcoming webinars. So thank you all for joining us online. I can see here in the Mentimeter survey that more than a half, or almost more than a half of the people that are attending today have also attended the previous webinar, which is very, very good to know. And we are happy that this topic raises interest, and you are inspired to participate in more than one webinar of this series. Since we don't want to spend a lot of time, and also we have one presenter, I will go to the next question. And this one is to know you a little bit better, and to know in which country are you right now. We prefer to ask it like this rather than which country are you from, because we know that many of you might not be living in your countries of origin. Answers are coming in very quickly. Thank you for that. Spain is the main highlight for the moment. We have also many participants from other European countries such as Ireland, Italy, Germany, Belgium, and always very interesting to note the international dimension of these events, with attendees from Turkey, from Trinidad, Tobago, Mexico, yes, countries from far away when we think about our own standpoint in Europe. So that is also excellent news. Thank you for that. Regarding your professional trajectory, it would be also interesting for us to know what is your background, and what makes you attend this webinar. Either you are attending as a student, as a practitioner, teacher, school leader, are you a policymaker? I see answers are also coming in very quickly. Thank you for that. As in the previous webinars, we can notice that most of you are practitioners linked to teaching, linked to education. We also have some people from research, quite a few, also some policymakers, a few people from NGOs and civil society organizations, and a few students, and also 2 school leaders so far. From the ones that voted until this point. So I apologize for rushing the voting procedure. It's just to not waste too much time, but we are very happy to know you better, and we are grateful for these responses. And I will end with a very last question about the NESET analytical report on which this series of webinars is based, entitled The Future of Language Education in Europe, Case Studies of Innovative Practices. And the question is if you already consulted this NESET analytical report, or perhaps you didn't even know that it existed, in which case I see that for the moment that is the case for the majority of you, and I will share the link to this report shortly in the chat box, and so that you can consult it. And then, of course, you can take the opportunity to check other NESET publications in different areas of education. And another particular report that we have as on multilingual education as well, you will find on our website. I think back to you, Dragana. Thank you so much for participating in the Mentimeter again.
Thank you. This has been an extremely useful experience for us, not only because we have reached out to much higher numbers than what we did during a conference in Brussels, but we have reached out also to practitioners and teachers who normally could not come to Brussels and attend the conference. The report itself is drafted for policymakers, so it is widely circulated at the European Commission and among national education and research funding organizations. But of course, these webinars are also an excellent tool for broadening our audience. And I think that now we can go to our everybody's favorite country, Finland, with $1 million question: how do we go from individual initiatives, often launched by enlightened and charismatic persons, to regional initiatives supported by the establishment in the region, and to a meaningful national strategy of the core curriculum that encapsulates a language awareness and use of linguistic resources as part of every school in the country. So great hopes are on you, Jenni. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I will talk about the current curriculum for basic education in Finland, and the presentation will cover the aims of the curriculum and how does it promote multilingualism, how is it implemented, what are the actors involved, and what are the key lessons in what to do if you want to promote multilingualism in your curriculum. So our National Agency for Education is responsible for designing the curriculum, but they are collaborating with teachers, teacher educators, researchers, and other policymakers. So the curriculum is always designed in a good consensus with different parts of educational system. The current curriculum came in forth in August 2016, and it, for example, it determines the operating culture for basic education, the values for each theory of learning, and aims and contents for every subject, and of course evaluation criteria. Background for the language awareness in the curriculum was that our learning environments have been more and more linguistically and culturally diverse. There have been also huge changes in reading habits, and boys, especially boys' reading skills, are 1.5 years behind compared to girls. And there's also a huge gap between the learning outcomes of immigrant background students and students without immigrant background. And the Finnish language skills of students with immigrant background are not at the level sufficient enough for studying academic subjects. So something had to be done. There was a huge concern about the democracy development, and this is why there was more attention to the role of language also in the curriculum design. At the same time, also the European Council was supporting multilingualism and the role of language in learning, and this affected a lot Finnish educational policy. Our National Agency of Education had a really good understanding of the research and global trends, indicating that attention to literacy skills was an important development topic at school, and multilingualism was part of this. So language awareness is one of the main aspects of the curriculum. It really determines the whole operating culture of the school. Our curriculum says that school is a place where languages and identities encounter and interact with each other. And I think it's very important that also the identities are now visible in our curriculum. according to the curriculum, students should be enabled to use and develop their whole linguistic resources. That means that all the languages that students know should be taken into account when they are learning. And what is important, every student has a right to use their own language. So multilingualism is seen as a natural part of every school. And also our curriculum considers that every student is multilingual, because also the parts of dialects, parts of languages could be seen as part of multilingualism. The values behind our language awareness are connected to the Constitution of Finland, and especially the Non-Discrimination Act and human rights. As Tuve Skutnapkangas talks about linguistic human rights, this is very much in line with the Finnish core curriculum at the moment. The value is that all the students, despite of their background, should be able to encounter each other and learn together in authentic interaction without being blocked by the school language. And we think that nobody speaks school when they are born, so everybody has to learn the academic language when they start learning school subjects as well. So this kind of language awareness takes into account all the students and is every student's right. This is a quotation of our core curriculum. So each community and community member is multilingual. Parallel use of various languages in the school's daily life is seen as natural, and languages are appreciated. I think this is very, very valuable 2 sentences in our curriculum, because when you think about that everybody is multilingual, there is a completely different understanding of the multilingualism if also the parts of languages and the dialects are considered as multilingualism. And more importantly, if all the languages are all the use of all the languages are seen as natural, it's very important. Another quote is that in language-sensitive community, attitudes towards languages and language communities are discussed, and it has to be understood that language has a central role in learning, interaction, collaboration, identity development, and integration to the society. So as you see, our curriculum really considers the role of language having a huge impact on the whole learning and whole personality of every student. When it comes to multilingualism in our curriculum, in our basic values for education in the curriculum, it's as written that valuing multilingualism is very important because all the languages are resources for learning. And the basic values for education also emphasize the significant importance of all languages, and it emphasizes that all the students also has to learn to respect and value all languages. Teachers are required to consider students' first languages as resources for learning. So this means in practice that all the languages can be used, for example, for information seeking, for making notes, for discussing about the topic with each other. So if you have, for example, 2 Arabic speaking students in the same class, they can discuss in Arabic when they are doing their collaborative work, for example, about the ecosystem or something like that. And teachers are encouraged to use multilingual practices. There was a question about this during the previous presentations, that how should the languages be used, multiple languages should be used in the classroom. So of course it has to be pedagogically planned, so teacher has to be aware how to guide the students to use their languages, and it doesn't really require the teacher to speak all the languages, but it requires certain language awareness. And it's explicitly stated in our curriculum that students' first languages are important in learning of other languages and all the subjects at school. There's still some common misunderstandings about among the teachers that if the students maintain their home languages, the learning of the school language will be slower, but according to very huge research data, it's completely opposite. So in the end, the goal is to achieve better learning outcomes of multilingual students by supporting multilingual practices. And there is a lot of evidence that when you support multilingual practices, also the learning outcomes are much better. Also, there is a statement in our curriculum that every student's languages, cultures, identities, and prior knowledge must be taken into account. And I think this is very valuable because if the student knows that whole person is appreciated as it is, he or she might be much more willing to engage with learning. And pupils are guided to see cultural and linguistic diversity fundamentally as a positive resource. Unfortunately, Finland is one of the leading countries in the statistics of racism in European Union, and we hope that our current core curriculum will change this development into another direction. Every student is encouraged to learn to know and appreciate their own linguistic background, which is very valuable. And there is another quote from the curriculum that education supports the pupils' development as versatile and skillful users of language, both in their mother tongue and in other languages. They are encouraged to use even limited language skills to interact and express themselves. As we know, some immigrant background students do not have writing skills in their first languages, but it doesn't matter. They can still discuss about the topics in their first languages. We have also in our curriculum a section called First Language Education for Immigrant Background Students. So there is a own curricular part of aims, contents, and evaluation criteria of all the immigrant languages spoken in Finland. And this recognizes the value of all the languages. And when it comes to the learning of additional languages, multilingualism is appreciated also there. There is a statement that multilingualism and other languages and cultures are valued. And one of the aims of learning additional languages is to increase students' understanding of cultural diversity and linguistic awareness too. Then there is something called multiliteracy. So according to our curriculum, every student has to interpret, produce, and value various forms of information, and it can be mediated by different media using verbal, visual, auditory, numeric, and kinesthetic symbols, using all the languages they know. So this is also related to multilingualism. And again, another quote from our curriculum, multiliteracy is developed in all school subjects, progressing from everyday language to mastering the language and presentational modes of different ways of knowing. And also in our curriculum, it is acknowledged that every subject has a specific language which has its own genre, textual practices, and so on. And that's why every teacher is also a language teacher and linguistic model of each subject. So I will conclude the aims of the curriculum. So educational equity for all the students should be provided. Every student needs to reach effective literacy and academic language skills. Every student should really learn academic language. And every teacher is a language teacher. Better learning outcomes of multilingual students should be achieved by supporting multilingual practices. And there is this quote about multiliteracy. So every student needs to be able to interpret or produce different kinds and types of media and information in different forms. So as you see, there's a lot of language-related aims in the curriculum and a lot of multilingualism supported aims too. And how is the curriculum implemented? As I already said, the design of the core curriculum is made in the collaboration with National Agency of Education, researchers, teachers, stakeholders. And then there are also municipalities who are designing their own local curricula, and moreover also schools have their school-specific curricula. And each of the teachers have to follow all the three dimensions of the curriculum. So of course the main curriculum is the national one, but then the local variations might be depending on the local specialities, and even the school's own emphasis for some specific issues might be visible in the curriculum. And linguistically responsive teaching is every student's right in every classroom. So this means that every teacher has to implement the language awareness in their teaching, and every teacher should use multilingual practices in their classrooms too. We have gained a lot of support for the implementation lately. Our Finnish Ministry of Education and Culture and also Finnish National Agency of Education have both been supporting several projects that have been developing teacher skills, both in in-service and pre-service teaching. There are a couple of websites, Divet and Upera, are some of the examples of the Finnish projects that have been funded by Ministry or National Agency of Education. And then there is Erasmus Plus program, Listiak, linguistically sensitive teaching in all classrooms, which also supports implementation of this curriculum. But as one of our administrators said, it's a big leap to make multilingualism as a part of the mainstream thinking, and our recent studies have shown that all the teachers are not yet fully prepared to implement this curriculum, but we are on a good way because the attitudes towards multilingualism are highly positive, but still the practices need a lot of support. Key enabling factors would be a change in the understanding of the role of languages in learning and thinking, because language education really has to be present throughout the curriculum if it's going to really be language aware curriculum. There has to be a shared understanding between researchers, policymakers, teachers, school leaders, and teacher educators as well. And there has to be a lot of commitment, national commitment, both political and also practical level. And it also requires persistent work and trust among teachers and policymakers, and it really requires long-term processing of the ideas, and that requires motivation for teachers' own professional development. And there's a lot of on the shoulders of school leaders and teacher educators, because if we want teachers to develop multilingual practices, we need to organize professional development there. And there have been a lot of professional development afternoons all around the country already. So I think this is very promising. And as I already said, there are a lot of projects funded that are supporting the implementation. But I would conclude in this final quote that what it really requires is a shared understanding of the importance of languages in learning, both on policy and on practical level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenni. We have obviously had 3 speakers who provoked a lot of opinions because most text in the chat are actually opinions, the pro and cons, and we see a lot of concern by the teachers. I think that with the last few slides, Jenni, you managed to provide part of the answer to one of the rather amusing questions that was posted. Somebody wrote, "Why would you speak in several languages in one class? What a mess." And I think that we would really need to point to the report that has been prepared to the key common European values and the competences portfolio to answer this question. But I think that we also absolutely need to take on board the authentic concerns of teachers for the difficulty that they need to be trained in order to address properly. We have largely used the time that we had for our seminar. It is actually, we are 4 minutes overdue. I will just reassure the participants that the questions will not remain unanswered. we have the fourth webinar, which will be on the 8th of July, where we will scoop the questions and try to answer them in a systematic way, and more particularly reflect on the lessons learned and ways forward for multilingual or plurilingual Europe that we are living in, and preparing our children to this very changed environment in which they will be working. So thank you very much to the authors of case studies. Thank you to the participants. I will close the webinar now and invite you on the 8th of July to join us again. Stay safe and have a pleasant end of the day.